Okay. Just a quick reminder, if you're not speaking, if you could, and you're virtual, please put yourself on mute if you're not speaking so that we don't get any echoes. Otherwise, Kendall over here is going to mute you. All right, let's move on to item number 2, public comment. Just a quick reminder, this will limit 3 minutes per person. We will have a second opportunity for additional public comments at the end of the meeting. So Kendall, did we have anybody sign up for public comment today?
No, sir. Nobody has signed up for a public comment.
All righty. Hearing none, let's move on to item number 3, which is the approval of minutes from the previous San Antonio Regional Flood Planning Group meeting. Can I get a motion for approval?
Debbie Reed approves or moves to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Derek, seconds. Any discussion on the minutes from the previous, from our previous meeting? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Let's move on to agenda item number 4, communications from the Texas Water Development Board. Anita, can I pass the time over to you?
Yes, hello everyone. So I just have a few updates today. TWDB held 2 conference calls on Wednesday, December 8th. The first was intended for technical consultants and planning group sponsors and included further guidance on both flood mitigation strategies and emergency need, as well as instructions for Exhibit D deliverables. Planning group chairs were invited to the next conference call, which focused on round robin updates and the discussion between the chairs, and also included a summary update from the technical consulting call that morning. I just want to let you all know that we have the recording of the technical consultant webinar on our website, as well as the slides from that presentation in case any of you are interested. Lastly, I want to note that our flood planning team sent out an email yesterday afternoon providing clarification on the notification requirements for officer elections per Section 2 of Article 8 of the model bylaws provided by TWDB. Required written notice of the meeting to select officers, that it should be sent to all members of the RFPG by the current secretary 30 days prior to the RFPG meeting. We wanted to inform you that we interpreted this to be an email to RFPG members, not posting for public view 30 days in advance. That's all I have.
Anita, thank you. Anita, thank you so much for that report. Is there any questions from any of the members of the committee on anything Anita presented? Thank you, Anita. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 5, chair report. I wanted to take a moment on item number 5 just to remind the committee, as well as obviously the consultants know this, but remind the committee that our tech memo will be due January 7th. And a couple of days before that, 3 days before that, we will have our meeting. So please make all efforts possible to attend that meeting so that we can have a vote on approval of the technical memo so we can move forward with that. Just a quick reminder, I'm assuming we're going to talk a little bit about that today on some of the things that are going to be needed. So just please keep your eyes open for any kind of email or correspondence so that we become well prepared for our next meeting in January. The other thing I wanted to take a moment to talk about is an effort that the city of San Antonio has been going through that I think, one, will provide an insight to some of the needs that we find in San Antonio, but also I think it's some lessons learned, particularly in the committee. You see, we had the city is issuing a probably the largest bond election that the city has ever done. And in that process, the city had to define what the overall infrastructure needs across multiple bonds, including streets, drainage, and a few other facilities and parks, a few other items. And in order to get those approved by council, created committees, not unlike this one, to review these projects. And we were fortunate to have a number of our members that sit on this committee participate and be a part of that committee. One of them being Mr. Steve Gonzalez, who's actually on the call. He actually sat on the streets committee, represented one of the council districts, as well as Suzanne Scott. Unfortunately, she could not attend today due to her company's holiday party going on right now. And as well as Debbie Reed, who she is here. I wanted to give Debbie a few minutes if she could just share with us a little bit about the experience that she went through being a part of the drainage bond committee representing Council District 2.
Thank you, Neffy. I hope I can do justice to this. I think as we become a larger and larger community with more and more money and projects that we're dealing with, it became obvious that we needed to look at some alternatives rather than trying to do, what was it, a month we had about, más o menos, looking at the 20 plus projects to be considered. I believe the city brought forth about that number, and then there was, of course, those from the citizens that were brought in, new projects, or what we called under the line projects that had been reported or had quad sheets on. So the recommendations from the committee, I think, were really well thought out and will give the city some food for thought for the future to actually create a standing committee that would meet quarterly on these types of projects so that they can have additional information when it gets down to the time of actually selecting a project. We were eventually able to receive the quad sheets, but having some consistencies to know a little bit more about the estimated, because they don't know for sure, the number of properties or structures that will be removed from either the floodplain or from a flooding hazard. I have to admit, one of my favorite topics was brought up, and I didn't even bring it up. I just want you to know that. So it was agreed by the entire committee to make sure that nature-based and green infrastructure was looked at for every project by the city to see how it could be incorporated. And somebody, again, it wasn't me, asked that there actually be, if it's not going to be able to be used, to have some kind of a statement that city council is aware of why it cannot be. There was also the recommendations for using the tree mitigation fund to enhance plantings, especially in drainage. And for our committee, because of it's a drainage, and a lot of these were culverts, we opted, or we're recommending to city council to drop the public art, and so that we were able to include 2 additional projects for construction. So.
Thank you, Debbie. Great summary there. But certainly one of the outcomes and one of the recommendations on the drainage was that a citizens group be created for the city so that projects get an opportunity, so people could really dig into them and really understand the process. Why I'm bringing this up, I think it's important because San Antonio, being obviously the largest metropolitan area in our watershed, there's this renewed interest in making sure that we're building projects that are sustainable, that are nature-based, that really address not only the flood component, but also multiple use type of projects. It was very exciting to hear these motions to really look at not just the one goal of just flood control, but something that encompasses everything. So it's pretty exciting to see, and I hope that even some of the work that happened there would bleed into some of the work that we are doing here and really benefit the entire region right now that at least the largest metropolitan area in our watershed is really moving forward with it. So it'll be some good things, good momentum moving forward on this. So, Mr. Mock, welcome. Don't you worry about it. Thank you for being here. I think I'll remind Suzanne. All righty. Those are the couple of items that I had to present. We're gonna move on to item number 6, which is an update from the Region 12 of subcommittees. As you recall, in our region, we have 2 subcommittees, one that focuses on the technical side, and another one that focuses on outreach. So I'm gonna ask Derek if he could take the floor.
Well, I was going to recommend actually communications go first because technical was all the exact topic that we're going to discuss today.
Very well, very well. Somebody here from, outreach did not meet.
All right, well, never mind then.
Okay. All right, well then that's summary of the subcommittees. We'll dive into some of the work here. Yeah. So let's move on to item number 7, which is discussion and appropriate action regarding the consultant's work and schedule. And that's Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we'll dig into a little bit on some of the outreach opportunities that we had. So quick thing on the agenda, we're going to talk about the schedule that Neffy mentioned that we're going to have over the next couple of weeks, give an outreach update, and then we will dig into task 4 that we met with the technical committee on. So the critical path schedule that you have in your packet. So task 3B, the goals was approved at the last meeting. Thank you to the planning group. So those are approved and moving forward for the technical memo. Task 4B is what we're going to discuss today for approval. Those were sent out. Technical committee reviewed them, sent back comments, and that was sent out to the group, and we can discuss those in further detail here in a moment. By the end of this week, we will have the draft tech memo for everyone to review. That will be sent out by email by either Kendall or myself. So each one of you will receive that. Please note that we will send it out individually. You'll receive it individually. So that way, if you have questions or comments, it'll come back to me, and that we don't need to, we can't really respond to it in a group setting because it can become a public meeting. So just remember that if you have any questions, comments, don't hesitate to call Troy or myself at any point during your review if you have questions. So you will have a couple of weeks. We are going to approve the draft memo at our January 4th meeting.
Ron, I'm sorry to interrupt. Because I suspect that when you send out the draft memo, I want to make sure that we're capturing in a formal way, we're capturing any questions or comments that we may have. Can we agree to either send them all to you or send them to Kendall?
Yes.
So that we all send questions or comments via email, because it's going to be from the 17th through the 31st.
Yes.
Just so that we can capture everything.
And I will send it out in Word format. And when my ask will be that you track changes in the Word document, if that's okay with.
I'll make it clear in the email that's sent out how exactly we want those comments to come back to the technical consultants so that it could be reviewed properly and added into the document. Ron, will you review the deadline again for comments on that?
Yes, the deadline for comments. I was fixing to get to that. So we, in order to make this January 4th meeting, we're going to have the tech memo posted by December 30th. What is that? The 30th, I think we have to have it posted. So we're asking for comments back by the 28th. That'll give me a couple of days to compile any comments and get the tech memo posted for the Open Meetings Act. So the email will go out with the tech memo tomorrow, and we're asking for comments back on December 28th. And we will post the copy to be voted on December 30th, and we will review that, any comments, changes, make updates at the January 4th meeting, and then the final approval, final deliverable is on January 7th.
So what I'm seeing on the screen is inaccurate. Comments will be due on the 28th, not the 31st.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, just let's be clear on that.
Yes. So it's different than as it is and stands in your agenda packet and on the screen. Comments are going to be due on the 28th. And you can send those to myself or Ron and Troy. Either way, we'll get them where they need to go. And I'll make that clear when we do send out the task memo and put it in bold how exactly we expect those comments and when.
Awesome.
Sounds good, thank you.
So quick outreach update. So on December 9th, we had a public and stakeholder meeting in Bandera. Didn't Linda join online by any chance? No? Linda's online? Okay, and so I may ask Linda to speak a little bit about, Linda's going to be putting it together, our sub-consultant on that, Jimenez as an associate. She will be putting a report together summarizing the attendees, what was discussed, some of the comments. So a little bit about what happened. We went there, we had a meeting in the morning with the public group that we presented what we were doing in our regional flood planning, and then we provided them the public comment tool that's live on the website now. And so everyone can send people to that already. As you reach out and talk to people, you can start sending them to the website, public comment. That's up and available. And so that's one of the ways we're collecting a lot of our data. And so we had a good meeting with the public, had a lot of good questions, got some good feedback. And then later that afternoon, after lunch, we met with stakeholders in the area. We had the city of Bernie, of course, the city of Bandera, a couple of the counties, city of Fair Oaks, quite a few communities, and we discussed what we would be collecting. And we will be, as we reach out to the different stakeholders and go down the region, we're going to do that. What we're asking the stakeholders for is a little bit more detail. We're asking them to verify their flood ordinances, higher standards, existing projects, and then upcoming projects that they have or upcoming study needs as we go through. So you
Ron,
can be prepared for that.
Ron, can you speak a little bit about how it was received? What kind of comments did you get, especially from the citizens as well as the stakeholders? Was there any particular comment that stood out or that?
No, I think
you'd like
it
to
was
highlight?
received really well. I think people were really, really excited about looking at it on a regional basis. That flooding was being looked at from the top of the San Antonio River Basin to the bottom. I think so from a public standpoint, I think that went over well. From the stakeholder group, it sounded, we learned a lot of things. We learned that there's a lot of data out there. There's I wasn't expecting to get some of the data that we got. We got some promises to get some great pictures from the emergency management staff in Bandera, and Mr. Mock's going to facilitate some of that. And then got some good history on some historical floods that I had I knew a lot of the historical floods here. I didn't know the stories of the historical floods of Bandera in the past. So we got some good information there. We got the flood gauge information for that. So a lot of good technical information and from that. And then from hearing from other communities, how far along, we knew of the Bernie master plan, but Fair Oaks had just completed theirs, and a couple other communities had some known flooding areas. So I thought it went really well. It was, with the horror stories that we had heard from other groups not planning. David did a great job. We probably had 10 or 12 people from the public there, and then we had a pretty packed room for the stakeholders. Everybody, I think, from every organization either showed up or sent someone. So I thought it was great. I thought it was a great turnout, great meeting. David, is there anything you want to add from your perspective, or
Yeah, I was kind
Mr.
of
Carroll,
curious
y'all
to
were
see,
both-
Mr.
y'all were
Mock,
both there.
how you felt, especially then after the meeting, as well as you, Mr. Carroll. If you could.
We have a robust enough voice. Yeah, I was surprised we got that many people this close to Christmas. But yeah, there was a lot of input, and we put a lot of stuff on the comment map for you. And when you get out there and really look, you can see what it's Flash Flood Alley out there. And you know, before Harvey, the record unfortunately was Bandera in 1978. Medina had the base flow of the Mississippi, so a lot of interest in it. Yeah, can you believe that little river was? that bad?
Was there any particular comment or anything somebody said that may have stood out to you that?
No, well, the one thing that we really started to get from people was we got a real problem with our low water crossings out there. People getting just stuck where they can't get out. And we're not talking a couple. We're talking just about every single one of them is a problem. So that was the main thing that we kind of were talking about as we started to look at some ideas of where we're going to move forward. And I don't know if you guys, I just thought about this as I said move forward. Did you all meet Doug? I came in late. Doug Schliblin, if I pronounce it wrong. That's USGS. He's in charge of your area here, and he decided to come in.
Sorry, I don't want to disrupt your committee, of course, but I've been out in detail for. You're going to really make me official here. So I've been out on detail for the last few months to out west for the center out there. They needed some help. So anyway, back here, I'd worked with David before and on some things up in Bandera. As you know, USGS here, I head up our office for the South Texas branch. So we're involved with flooding, drainage, early flood warning and that. So whatever we can do to help the committee and your goals, I'm here. So I'm here to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us. I certainly appreciate it. I've seen your name a couple of times. So thank you for being a part of this.
Yeah, I just want to put that out while I was seeing him in my peripheral. But no, that's the main thing. There was a lot of input, a lot of really good information from the stakeholders. The judge was there. He went through the 78 flood, and that's who we're getting the pictures from. And apparently they have a lot of them. And they were very helpful, the pictures, when we were modeling our flood warning system, because we could look at the model and then compare it to a historical flood. And, you know, it was very helpful. So I'm going to get them to him. And that's all I really got about it.
And Mr. Rock, thank you so much, because I know you had your staff also assist in setting it up. So thank you so much for that.
No worries.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Jeff, do you have anything?
I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the public portion. I had conflicts, but I made it to the stakeholder meeting. I know several of our Bernie vocal citizens did make it to the meeting for the public part, so I have an idea what they said. And we speak to them all the time. So, but I know the stakeholder meeting was very well attended. I know the city, like Ron said, there's City Fair Oaks, Kendall County, Bernie, Bandera. So we had some good conversations. And the thought that kind of came to my mind too is just cooperation between government entities. That there's always going to be some opportunity for government entities to cooperate together to maybe do other projects. And that's something we should kind of talk about more too.
Yeah, thank you. That's certainly a very good observation. I'll tell you, we've seen it in our region here in San Antonio when agencies come together, such as the Water Board, certainly the USGS, and others. When everybody pitches in and helps, man, it can make a big difference. It could really make a difference in the lives of our citizens. So it's exciting to see that. So thank you guys for that report, Ron.
And one of the things that struck me, Neffy, is, you know, when I talk to you about low water crossing concerns in San Antonio, we talk about a couple of hours that a road's being closed. Talking to Mr. Mock and people up in the Bandera area, they talk it being closed for weeks, right? You know, so because when you get it up, and you know, we don't think about the base flow that all of a sudden is apparent when they have this amount of rainfall. So never even crossed my mind on some of the amount of time that we're talking up there. So it was enlightening to hear some, you know, a different perspective than what. For that amount of time. So it put everything, the low water crossing thing. And then one of the other needs it sounded like from a lot of the communities is you hear the stories in rural America where, hey, when the water gets over this road, we know we have a couple hours to close it down. And that's part of the way that, you know, in the upper basin that they're operating in some aspects. So the need for more gauges for that aspect, for the flood warning system. So those are the two things that struck me. Were the low water crossings, the amount of time that were behind there, and talking about, you know, talking to Mr. Mock about the possibility of, you know, if these low water crossings are closed for multiple days, you know, is it possible to get drones and other equipment to bring them supplies? What are the, you know, things that we're not thinking about, hadn't thought about before in flood planning and how to be more resilient is to think outside of the box. So I think that there's going to be, it was really interesting hearing those things.
Certainly, and Mr. Mock, I hate to do this to you, but I'd really love to be interested to hear a little bit about not only some of the challenges that you guys that you're seeing, you know, in that northern area, but also some of the solutions that you guys have come up with. Obviously, low water crossings is an issue even here in San Antonio. It's a huge issue, and for us here in San Antonio, it's really taken in. We've gotten into the hands of our traffic engineers because we know, okay, we know that this crossing is out of commission for hours, in our case. Where are people going to go to? So I'm curious if you guys have thought of things like that, and maybe at our future meeting, perhaps we can get a map up and just give you a few minutes to kind of talk to us about some of the solutions or the workarounds that you guys have been doing, because obviously you've been doing work and, you know, things seem to be going well.
Well, it's challenging out there because of the terrain. You know, it's very steep. We don't have any soil up that part. So when it rains, you know, we get a lot of runoff. The biggest thing we did was the flood early warning systems that we got with the USGS. And what that allows us to do is get a predictive model. Now, instead of putting a deputy out at a low water crossing to wait for it to flood, we can actually determine when we think it's going to flood. And that way we could start to move people out of the way. The other problem we got out there is, unfortunately, unless you RV, we have a lot of RV parks and they want to put them down by the river. So that's always a problem there. But yeah, I can give a short talk on it if you want me to. I'll bring some slides or something. We got some pretty gnarly looking pictures.
That'll be awesome. Yeah. We'll work with your schedule, and if we can schedule that later on.
Sure, we can put that on the February agenda after we've passed the tech memo in January.
And Neffy, one of the things that was obvious is he mentioned the RVs and close to the river. And it's kind of interesting that when we talk about floods, we call them Memorial Day floods, Labor Day floods, right around holidays when people are down by the river, right? So, you know, it's you know, that's just the way life's going to happen, right? And so it brings a whole nother aspect to safety, because you're not necessarily providing safety for your constituents or people in, you know, this is visitors, you know, who may not be there, may not know the area, and you're trying to get them out of there at night, you know, so it brings a whole new aspect into emergency management.
Yeah, 2 years in a row it was Memorial Day weekend, so we saw freaked out on the third year. But if you remember the news, we had news accounts that they were showing cowboys out there roping stuff and pulling it out, tractors. It was a lot of people had to go out and save themselves, so to speak, because it is rural. So yeah, I can put something together for February.
Well, I'll tell you, I'd be interested in just kind of the lessons learned. You know, what did you guys learn from that? Because there's some incredible lessons when a flood comes through, and they're lessons that we need to take serious and take action based on that. Otherwise, you know, you try and doing the same thing over and over without changing. So
that's what I had for the December 9th meeting. We have another one coming up on January 11th in St. Hedwig, and it's at Linda. Are you online? Maybe you can give us the latest on the meeting. I believe it's at 6, but maybe Linda or Laura can probably give us an update.
Hi, this is Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good. I'm using a different laptop here. It will be January the 11th at Tradition Elementary School in St. Hedwig, Texas, at 6:30, beginning until 8 p.m.
And we do have, Mr. Chair, we do have flyers, social media outreach. And so that's gone out. It's going to be in the Wilson County newspaper. So it's gone out in a couple of different places. If we can maybe work with the city as well to start getting it on their social media outlets. I need to get with you to find out who to talk to for the social media outlets there.
As far as from our sponsor, from the River Authority, are you guys
Yep, they're up.
assisting with communication on that? Wonderful.
So that's all I had for the outreach update. So jumping into task 4. So we had a meeting earlier this month with the technical committee. We had gone over task 4A and 4B with the technical committee. Part of what we are required for the technical memorandum is drafting a process to identify how we were going to, or to identify a process, how we're going to identify different flood management strategies, projects, and evaluations. So to jump into task 4, task 4 is a flood mitigate. The 4A is flood mitigation analysis needs. So the floods needs analysis is based on task 2A and 2B. 2A and 2B, if you remember, I'll give a quick update. That's where we gathered. Task 2A is the existing flood hazard layer and our existing vulnerability, which we overlay with the building footprint. That process, we have all of the floodplain data. We received the Fathom data at the end of October. We received the preliminary data, some of the preliminary data from the River Authority. So we have the data that we were going to move forward with. We were waiting on the building footprint updates from the Water Development Board, which we received. So we are, with existing conditions, we are progressing really nicely. For the proposed conditions, that's where we're going to use the 500-year for the 100-year future. And then we have our methodology for the 500-year future, and kind of run into the same analysis to identify the flood-prone areas. And so through that identification of those areas and looking at where we don't have inundation maps, which is almost in our region non-existent. We cover most of the entire area in inundation mapping. And then we look at emergency need and documenting historic flooding. So with all of that will be part of what we will use to gather and collect all of the flood mitigation needs analysis. It's kind of where we at in our region now, identifying critical infrastructure that's flooded, low water crossings is part of that. Again, areas of high concern, and areas where we could possibly see emergency need, kind of looking at the unflooded access type of scenarios. So that's what goes into the flood mitigation needs analysis for the region, for that. So that was just a quick, as we're going through all of these different stages, I'm kind of trying to update the planning group on what goes into this. So that's task 4A. We don't need anything approved from the group at this time. That's just kind of a status on where we're at and where we're going. So then we roll into task 4B, which is the identification and evaluation of potential flood management evaluations, strategies, and projects. So as we're going through our public outreach and stakeholder process, we're asking stakeholders for projects that are in construction or constructed recently. We're asking them for their CIP programs, like what they have coming up. Part of that could be their flood planning studies and strategies that they have coming forward, and then as well as future projects. So as we're collecting that data, that's going to be that's really helping us identify some of these different things that we're going to go in to talk about what our different projects are. Also, as part of that, when we're gathering the public information, the public outreach information, they're identifying flood prone areas that we may, as a community, don't know about yet, and so we'll cluster those and possibly be able to make projects or evaluations or studies out of those. So that's where we're getting our information. So that's where we're starting from. We're not starting from, we're not developing projects. We're getting the projects that are already, we're collecting the projects that are already have been developed, have been thought about, or there is a need for those projects. And part of that would be the 311 data that the city is doing, and other cities like San Antonio are doing. So that's kind of where what goes into that. So what is an FMP, FME, and FMS, right? We've a lot of people, you through the state flood planning, we've been throwing those three acronyms out like everyone knows what they are. And I just wanted to make sure that we define them here and going forward. That way we can talk about them and know what y'all know what I mean when I say FMP, FME, and FMS. So FMP is a flood mitigation project. So for all intents and purposes, these are what I'm going to refer to as projects moving forward. These can be structural or non-structural in nature. Structural can be bridges, culverts, storm drains, regional detention, nature-based projects, things of that scenario, and non-structural as well. Easements, acquisitions, flood warning system, flood proofing. But those are going to be a project. I'll give you a little bit more definition later what it requires to be a project, and we'll go through that. But for now, a flood mitigation project is a project that will reduce flood risk. A flood mitigation evaluation, which we'll refer to as evaluations going forward, is it could be additional H&H modeling, flood mapping updates, kind of like what the River Authority is doing, flood studies, regional master plans, things of that nature that will help identify projects. So there could be things that a flood management project might not meet certain criteria here. And so it can be an evaluation, and evaluation just means it needs more study, needs more time, needs additional information. So a project that needs more information could be a FME, an evaluation that can be improved in the future. And then there's floodplain management strategies. This is kind of what we said would be like what wasn't a project or wasn't an evaluation was a strategy. And it's a proposed plan to mitigate flood hazard. And it's kind of what we've talked a lot about in our region about the floodplain manager's toolbox. A lot of those things fit into the strategy on how we can come up with ideas to reduce flood risk. Regions don't have to provide any strategies. I mean, but that is an option. We can identify things as a strategy moving forward. And we've had Troy and I've heard some really great ideas, and we know we're going to have some great strategies to reduce flood risk across the region. And it can be these can be for the region or area specific.
So Ron, the flood mitigation strategies, would that be something like recommendations to update code or standards, say, maybe change the floodway standards, or, go away from floodways or things like that? Would that be considered a strategy and not necessarily evaluate, not a flood mitigation evaluation?
So the intent of all of this, Neffy, is these are what we're going to identify in the plan that we're hoping to one day get funding for. So if a strategy is something that we're going to need money for, right? If we can identify a cost for it, right? If we can have a cost estimate, and we can for that, if it has a cost other than passing code, right? Then yes. So a strategy would be developing a flood managers outreach program. The city of Bernie developing a floodplain managers outreach program to help identify different things that they can do to manage their flood risk in their region. There could be a cost associated with that program versus the code is more it's a what we had talked about identifying in the plan.
So if a recommendation was to go forward to say, you know what, all floodplain administrators in our regions should be a certified floodplain manager, a CFM. That obviously there's a cost associated with going to the classes and then taking the test. Would that be considered a flood mitigation strategy?
Yeah, I think we could probably put that in a way to, say, we believe that Region 12 needs more floodplain managers that are certified floodplain managers, and we're going to develop a program or something to help them become that, right? So whether or not, so we could get this Sarah and the cities to develop a class, right? And so what was the cost for that class could be a strategy, right? It's the strategy has to be tied to a cost estimate. It has to have a cost, because essentially this is the Water Development Board's way of how are we going to fund different projects, evaluations, and strategies. And so it's a little difficult on the strategies, but these are things that as we go through, we'll kind of look into. And if it's not a project, it can be an evaluation. If it's not evaluation, it can kind of be lumped into this, and we can go with that. Troy, you got.
Yeah, I was just going to say the example that's given in our technical guidance is like a study to develop a countywide floodplain development policy. So that could be funded through either local or federal funds. So for this region, it could be, a study to develop a region-wide technical guidance manual or something like that. Those are the kinds of things that could be a strategy rather than just being an evaluation. But Ron's right, it's kind of a catch-all at the end of the day.
So what I hear, this could actually fund our training for how to manage those floodplains in a more resilient way, right? Cool. Okay. Can I ask one more question, Ron?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think this is appropriate place. So if we were going to look at flood conservation easements or land set aside or nature based, would that be a strategy with a cost? How would you
Say that again? If we were going to look for,
if you were going to try to move the nature based and land conservation forward, how would that apply? Would that be here as a strategy? Can you
I
do
think
an analysis?
I think that would probably fall farther under an evaluation, right? An evaluation can be a study to look at. Let's go through this and
Okay.
then let's see.
Yes, thank
Let's
you.
see if it. Derek knows what I'm talking about.
I
We
thought I
sat
might
there
need
and we went through
need
the
to
flow
wait.
charts and
I can
We
be
went
patient.
way round and round in the technical committee on this very topic.
Yes. Oh.
And so I'm gonna, since I have this, we're looking at this slide here. We're starting in on we're step one here. If you roll back in your last, I would say it's the last 4 or 5 pages. Let's see, 1, 2, the last 3 pages. You can almost take those off. This is the process. These last 3 pages. This is the actual process that we're going to approve. That's actually going to go into the technical memorandum. This is the one that the technical committee had reviewed and looked at. So as we go through that, that's what we're talking about in this step 1, 2, 3. So step one, it's the initial screening, right? This is so. So what we're doing now is I told you what FMSs, FMEs, and FMPs are. Now it's how are we going to evaluate them, or how are we going to screen them, and how are we going to put them into our plan? And so this 3-pager that we have, this is the actual process that we've identified that's required by the Water Development Board, and it meets their guiding principles that we've looked at. And so this is the process, and I'm going to step you through the process, and hopefully it may answer some, like Debbie's question that she had. So step one, it's the initial screening. And so in order to be an FMP, FME, and an FMS, it has to be related to floodplain it has to be related to one of the floodplain management goals that we set. It needs to meet emergency. It can meet for any of these reasons. It can be an FMS, FME, or FMP. It's related to a floodplain management goal. It meets emergency need. It has to have a drainage area of 1 square mile or greater, and where all of these reduce the risk of the 100-year chance flood. Now, the regional flood planning group can ask for exemptions to that for critical facilities, transportation routes, or others. So Mr. Carroll had a comment on, can we define other? Do we want to, I guess my question, Jeff, and I'd like to, do we want to define other? Because I don't know what might come up, what reasons we might ask for an exemption in the future. If we want to, if we had a project that we really thought that it didn't have to meet 100-year, it could only meet a 50-year. Neffy had a project that was, we all thought, man, that's a really great project, but it only meets a 50-year goal. But the city of San Antonio has to have that. I'd hate to throw that out and dismiss it because it didn't meet that goal. So for the most part, it doesn't require, it doesn't qualify unless it's a critical facility, a transportation route. So we left the other in there. So I don't know if you had any comment on what you were thinking, Jeff, or.
No, I was really just kind of commenting, did we define that somewhere else, or how do we know what other really is? I mean, all of us could have a different idea of what other factor might be that we'd want to do, and do we need to define that better or not?
We could come up with a project that's got a VCA of 5 and it's a really great project, but it can't meet the 100-year, but a 5 times reduction in risk would be huge, or cost related to risk.
Yeah.
So there could be factors like that we might.
That's what I think we need. Yes, I think we need some type of a matrix so that you can add some of those other aspects that may assist a project to meet the criteria.
Right, because as I'm thinking of all the projects that I've been a part of where we could not meet the 100-year for either structural reasons or financial reasons, whatever the case is. And the ones that always come to mind are actually low water crossings, the thing that we've been talking about, because we have low water crossings that if you build a bridge, it's going to be so large that you're going to create a situation where people won't be able to access the road. So in that particular case, we have to keep it lower so that people's driveways, so people can get out. And because of that, we made the decision we're going to go with something less than the 100-year. So it's either transportation, which is a bridge, or critical facilities. I thought of physical facilities being almost the opposite, where you want to mitigate for even larger flood events. But yeah, I like the idea of just keeping others because it gives us flexibility. I don't want us to narrow ourselves so much that.
I'd like to use other included in the matrix somehow, however the team thinks is best, for resiliency. How can you maintain resiliency in the region, in the area, especially as we know in a lot of these areas, there's going to be additional development. So while the Texas Water Development Board is not having us look at future conditions, I think it's critical for us to consider that in our matrix and evaluation.
One of the other comments received was from Ms. Reed. She made the comment, right now, all projects, evaluations, and studies are required to mitigate this 100-year, that's the 100-year existing. Debbie made a good point about, managing for the 100-year existing. We need to start considering managing for the 100-year ultimate or 100-year future. And while my idea for that, Debbie, we should identify which projects meet the future right now. But I don't think since many of the projects throughout the region probably, or at this point, may not necessarily meet that requirement because of what our future floodplain looks like right now. Not all areas have a 100-year or future floodplain like we're developing for this study. And so we don't want to limit a project because it doesn't have that opportunity. So I'm suggesting to you that we screen them based on the 100-year with the exemptions, but we will note which ones meet the 100-year ultimate, if that's something. Okay. So that's the initial screening, right? It's a high level, right? We're going to get all these projects, and we're going to say, in order to be one of these, does it meet this? So if Mr. Carroll puts a street project on here, and it doesn't have a floodplain management goal, we're gonna have to kick it out, kind of thing. That's so, or it doesn't meet a 1 square mile, it wouldn't qualify.
Yeah, that was kind of another point I wanted to make, that's strategic, and it's really interesting that we're identifying specifically a drainage area of 1 square mile. That the location of the project has to drain that amount. For it to be a FEMA floodplain, is it 1 square mile or 1.5 square mile? It doesn't have to be at all.
There's no limit on it.
Yeah.
Well, traditionally.
I'm listening to Aaron. Aaron,
We have a lot of.
We have a lot that are less than one,
we do.
and we have a hard time getting rid of those. It's against the rules. But the threshold to start fresh is a 1 square mile drainage area.
So I find that interesting because in my mind, the way I kind of think about it is if there's a FEMA floodplain on this project, it could be a good candidate. Because again, we're looking at the screening. So I think that's strategic to do that. Makes sense.
And that's in the guidance. So, okay. So once they've made the initial screening, we're going to go to step 2, screening of the floodplain mitigation projects. So there's 2 things that it's required. There's no negative effect, and there's sufficient data. So what does that mean? I sent out the data, Debbie, and so there's sections in the code what the no negative effects, and I'll kind of give a brief summary of what that is, and then the minimum data. Sufficient data. It must be reliable. Have models for it. Have mapping. And it must meet the Water Development Board guidelines that we provided. And then no negative effect. It cannot have a negative impact on the 100-year flood event. It must not raise the flood elevation or increase discharge of the 100-year flood event. And any of the following will disqualify the project in the screening step. Increase in inundation of homes or commercial building. Increase inundation beyond existing or proposed right-of-way easements, or increase inundation beyond existing drainage infrastructure capacity. So,
does it specify whether you look downstream or upstream, or meaning, okay, can understand no impact downstream. Does it differentiate if you're backing water up?
No impact.
No impact, either upstream or downstream, okay. Now, I find this interesting because these two items are actually interlinked because you have to have sufficient data to prove that there's no negative effect. If you don't have enough data, is that going to put us in a bind with communities if there hasn't been enough data, enough analysis done?
It's probably going to be the biggest reason that projects aren't going to qualify. There's going to be two things, right? A cost estimate is required. Haven't got there. A cost estimate is required, and no downstream impact. Those are going to be the two biggest things we foresee driving them from floodplain, from projects to evaluations, Neffy. So there's this opportunity to be. It could still be an evaluation, meaning it needs more study. And to kind of back that up, there's additional funding. The additional funding that was received from the Water Development Board was the possibility of advancing some of those evaluations to projects. So that's kind of how all this is working together now.
Do you guys understand that difference? I mean, I think this is crucial. So, for example, if we're working with city of, I don't know why I always pick on the city of Rungi, but just because I like the way it comes out. I like the way it sounds, comes off with. But if you're working with the city of Rungi and they have a project, if they have not done a cost estimate, apparently, and the downstream analysis, it's going to be sorted out here. That project will not be included. But what Ron said, I think, is real important, that even though it may not qualify as a FMP or a project, it can qualify as an evaluation where we say we need funding to do the analysis. So if there's a community that may have a project that say, yeah, there's a bridge that needs, or a culvert that needs to get done, but we don't have a downstream impact analysis or an impact analysis, that project can still qualify as a flood mitigation evaluation and still get funding. Do you guys understand that? Okay, I want to make sure because there's opportunities here.
Isn't it upstream and downstream?
For the impact?
Yes.
Yes.
And how does water quality and shear stress and bank stabilization play in that?
This velocity increases are allowed as the water surface elevation increase does not exceed 1 foot. There's specific things on the velocities, the valley storage, downstream, in this 3.6 that's included in your packet. It's exactly what the no negative impacts are, and velocity and valley storage is in that.
And water quality would be included in that?
Water quality is not included in that.
That's interesting since it's in the guidelines or in the technical. So can we get clarification from Texas Water Development Board on that?
We can ask.
Thank you.
Get back to my slides here. So FMPs, screening, and then on page, it would be, since we're doing front and back, 1, 2, 3, page 4. I'm holding it up. The first one, attachment A. It's a flow chart. This comes straight from the Texas Water Development Board guidance document, and so that is basically the process. Is there sufficient data? No. Then the planning group may recommend an FME. If there is, does it have any negative impact? Yes. Then the planning group cannot recommend this project. No. Is there sufficient data to include for 3.9? And then, so it just goes through the whole flow chart, but this is the screening process that we're going off of.
I think this is really important because I will tell you that when I initially saw these and I read this document, one of the concerns I had was that very same thing, that communities would have a list of needs and projects, but there wasn't enough data to perform the impact analysis, to prove that there's not a negative impact. And it worried me or concerned me that people would, or communities would feel like, oh, great, we need to pitch in, we need to put in money to be a part of this. And I was feeling it's going to be really tough to get projects on here. But with this a flow chart, it really shows that, yeah, if we're at that junction, we can actually get funding to do this study, to do the extras, the needed analysis to them for it to become a project eventually.
Yeah, and Neffy, I could see the city of Runge having 5 projects that didn't meet the requirements in here to be a floodplain management project.
Yeah.
But they could develop a study to take all 5 of those projects further to where they did qualify. And so that could be the project.
And I think that's an important message to our outreach committee, that, because many times when things like this happen, there is a dividing line. There's a limit, this is what we can support, this is what we can. And I think our outreach committee, it's that we share that message, that even though we might not have enough data right now, we can get funding to get enough data. And then get on that list. I think that's an important distinction.
So next we'll move to 2.2, which is screening of the FMEs and potential projects that do not meet the screening criteria in 2.1 could then be studied. Planned flood studies or risk reduction alternatives analysis in conjunction with floodplain management opportunities. So a floodplain management evaluation can be a drainage master plan, right? We know we need a drainage master plan, but a floodplain management evaluation can also be a project that doesn't have enough data, or it could be one of the public comments that we received, right? Example, Mr. Mock went in and added public comment from known flooding areas in Bandera County. We could identify one or multiple of those points, and a floodplain FME could be a study on what it would take to make that a project. In all of these, one of the main things too, Neffy, and this usually isn't a problem, but they all have to have a willing sponsor. So if there's one out there somewhere that no one wants to mess with, it does have to have a sponsor, so that's important. And then it needs to identify structures. So this one, you have to be able to quantify structures, populations, critical facilities, roadways, agricultural lands that are at risk. So it has to have it has to have a issue with it. It can't just be Mr. Chair's backyard that has a flooding issue. It has to have a population or something bigger than that, right?
That's impossible, Ron. I live on a hill.
I'm glad to hear that. So that's part of what goes into. So there's a screening process. One of the comments from Mr. Bays was looking at a chart to do that. So put one together. It's in attachment B now. Kind of the same thing. The chart is it goes through exactly what. It goes through, does the potential FME have because they have to this has to have a cost estimate too, right? But the level of the cost estimate can be much lower. And if does it have a cost estimate, yes or no? Does have a sponsor, and does it identify structures, population, or critical facilities? The one change that I'm going to make to this flow chart is on the bottom left. It will say, instead of right now, it reads the regional flood planning group cannot recommend this project in the plan. That one is incorrect. That one should be the regional flood planning group may consider recommending this project in the plan. So in order to consider it, it has to meet all of these, yes, 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 yes. So this will be changed with that one update.
Just a question, are we going to ask for estimated life expectancy of the project? Or maintenance upkeep or some additional, so you can construct it, but can you take care of it or replace it, or what is the time?
Yeah, I think that's another one, Debbie, that, we're going to ask for every bit of information that comes with that. It is not required as part of that, as to, maintenance isn't part of what the Water Development Board's looking at as part of their screening criteria at this time. And I don't know if,
Yeah, I would say because it's screening, it wouldn't be necessarily at this step. It would be in the next phase of evaluation. And, if there are, is the sponsor able to maintain whatever might be built or evaluated or, but not at this point is my thought.
What about life expectancy? Would that be the same? So
I-
that you know how many?
Yeah, I would say that again, Debbie, because this is the sieve, or this is the screening process. I think what you're asking is very valid and certainly something that I want to know. Will the sponsor be able to maintain it? Is it buildable? You bring up really good questions, but I agree with Derek in that I think in the next round and the next level is really what we need to be asking is at this point, I just don't want to turn away a lot of projects. I want to get as many projects as we can.
This is where we screen out Neffy's backyard as an example.
I want a mid feature in my backyard.
One of the things I do think we have to be careful about too is not projects that are intended to provide for future development are probably not going to be acceptable.
I was going to ask that because I've seen examples of communities wanting to, let's mitigate this and take advantage. I wondered how that would, if it would fit in there.
That, because you're not reducing risk. Existing risk for existing structures, buildings, roadways, then yeah, if it's something that's being set up to allow future development, that's not going to have a BCA very high.
Thank you for taking care of that issue, but does that eliminate land conservation?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm saying a project that would come in and reduce floodplain so that the land that was taken out of the floodplain could be developed in the future. If it doesn't have homes on it today, it doesn't, have a risk associated with it today because it is natural land, then we can't put a value to removing that risk. I've just run into that in a couple other processes in the past where folks were trying to get funding, and it's hard to tell somebody, but that's the way it should be. We don't subsidize private development usually.
Thank you, Troy.
So then next is 2.3 is where we will screen our FMSs. And again, those have to, those have to have a planning level cost estimate. Again, planning level, right? Different than a cost estimate. The planning level cost estimate, we have to kind of have an idea of what things might cost, willing sponsor, and quantifies the estimated flood risk being addressed. Again, probably need to know that it does more than Mr. Chair's backyard again. And, but that's part of what it goes into on the strategy part of that. So there's an overall screening, then we get into each one of these, screen each one of them. And then now all of them are screened. Then we go into step 3. We added a step for Region 12. This was the recommendation of River Authority. Aaron asked, and had a great comment, is at this point we should tie it back and identify each one of these strategies, evaluations, and projects, identify it back to the goals. So we're going to go back in and say how they link back up to the goals. So in the third step, the project's evaluation strategies identified will be assigned to one or more of the goals identified in task 3B. So that'll be step 3. And then step 4 is the final, it's a detailed assessment. And this one is potential projects must have a benefit cost ratio of greater than 1. And again, there's the BCA tool. Water Development Board has developed that tool. That's not a one that we're going to change or modify. That tool is coming from the Water Development Board. Have a willing sponsor, and we had a comment on this one too, and we can talk about this. There must be no known unsurmountable implementation constraints or hurdles such as right-of-way acquisition, utility costs, or permitting issues. This may not be an exhaustive list, and what one community may think is insurmountable is different than the other. And but the one thing I think I want to make sure that as a planning group we know there hasn't been any limitation put on funding amount, right? So it's just because we think something is insurmountable, it shouldn't be. I don't know if insurmountable cost is a reason to put it out. And that's kind of a lot of times what we feel of insurmountable. I think insurmountable would mean there is no possible way we would ever get the right of way for some reason. No one would, there would be absolutely no way to get the right of way. A utility conflict for some reason we know there was actually, we couldn't move or change. So, or permitting. So we may want to talk a little bit about rewording of that. I know I had a comment on that, Mr. Chair, but we don't want to we don't want to recommend something into the plan where we know there's no way it can be built and waste time. We don't want to waste taxpayer money, our money in the future, our time in the future to look at a project we just know that can't be built. And so this was the verbiage that we used. And if there's anything else that if somebody wants to suggest editing it to, we can do that.
And this is where the catch-all, not a catch-all, but things like Debbie mentioned earlier, where you start talking life cycle, or I'm sorry, lifespan, or O&M requirements, and this is where those other additional factors could be taken into account during this evaluation process. It's past everything else so far, but you can look at BCA numbers and you can look at all these other things too, like water quality could be in that additional criteria or evaluation analysis.
So would that be another bullet under step 4? Can we add that?
For which the bullet to
Other factors like I just talked about.
Yeah,
That's where you would consider these during the evaluation, I would think. It's not just because I think a more deep, right? Because as you're looking at this right here, I'm not saying we have to outline everything that we would consider, but it's possible that you read this right now of you're just going off of BCA as the higher the BCA, the better. And that may not be the only thing that we should be considering. So maybe there's an additional line that says this is where other project considerations would be analyzed. And we keep it somewhat broad because I don't know if we know all of those right now.
Understandable. I think yes. I think that we can add that. I don't see any reason why we couldn't add that here. Do you think anything, Troy? We can definitely add that here. If it's okay, just to kind of so we have the verbiage down, we can agree on it. So when we ask for a vote, that we know that we're going to change this. So in step 4, we're going to add a bullet that says regional planning group will evaluate projects, evaluations, and strategies for other, what we want to call them, not hurdles or other criteria.
Yeah.
Just
Other constraints or criteria?
I think
considerations.
It's one of the things we have to already look at for that. And this is an FPs that all have benefits.
Yeah, one of the here in the this is the technical guidance is potential impacts and benefits from the FMS FMP to the environment, agriculture, recreational resources, navigation, water quality, erosion, sediment, and impacts. We could also put maintenance in that. Okay.
yeah, I think that I'm good with that. Sure.
I agree.
And I think Debbie, just kind of thinking about it from a maintenance standpoint, thinking about it kind of goes back to that willing sponsor a little bit. If Rungy's gonna decide to build something but says Derek has to maintain it, and he's like, we're not open to maintaining it, we're not gonna sponsor that. So I could see, there's a little bit of that sponsorship that's how I see that sponsorship could come back into that.
Debbie, does that make sense?
Ye-
That it's also partly on the sponsor and their willingness to do that.
Is that in the contract for the sponsor?
Well, it just as part of this, as part of the being a project sponsor, and part of it us putting it on the list. It has to be. It has to have a sponsor. So it has to.
And that's not necessarily saying the river authority, because they're our
No.
sponsor, the sponsor of the project.
No, I get that. And so that would be a part of the contract. I mean, there's not really a guarantee that the sponsor of this project will continue to operations and maintenance and then replacing it at the end of its life expectancy.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the contract and how that would go, that would be above and beyond us. But I think at the evaluation part of it, as we're going through it and we identify a project and we're going back and we're having these conversations with the technical committee in the future, and we're like, okay, can I have somebody to raise their hand that they're going to sponsor this? And no one raises their hand. That one's going off, and there could be multiple reasons why that went off.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it sometimes where there's no contract, but you might see in some form of application or commitment letter that, the applicant or the sponsor says, in addition, we think this is a great project, but we're also, we've made arrangements that we can commit to, the 20 years that this project is estimated to last. We're dedicating this portion of our revenue to maintaining it. You see that a lot in grant applications and things along those lines.
Yeah, and that may be where it's good. We can go back and tie back to that initial evaluation of which communities have a dedicated funding source for stormwater management or whatever that section of it was. So that is part of the evaluation of the overall program. So we can look at how that connects to the individual sponsors and the needs, right, for the project. Depending on the project, it may not have a lot of maintenance needs at all.
One more question so will we put together, I know that Texas Water Development Board has a form for folks to complete to submit their projects. Will we do something special and include some of this information as we seek them in our region?
Yeah, there's the table we have to fill out on each one of these is probably about as long as this table here. I think it's not, it won't fit on one sheet. It's like a 3-page table.
Ron, I do need to mention I guess I'm interested to learn more about the benefits cost ratio and how that's going to get developed. Certainly, in working with not only state and federal grants, it's a certain methodology, and I'm familiar with that. Here locally, we do it a little bit different, but I think that's going to be an important component, because I would hate to be in a situation where some community, Rangi, identifies a project and the appraisal value, let's say, is one that it may not be very high, but when you really look at it, I mean, we're talking about people's livelihoods. We're talking about land that they use for whether it's agricultural or residential or whatever it is. I'm really going to be looking at really paying attention to how the benefit cost ratio is going to be done. And I know that that's a requirement from the state. But I'm going to be really interested to understand that better, to really help our community, making sure that we're getting that correct ratio there.
That tool is available. It's been put out already. And we can get you the documentation for that. Let's look at it, and if we need to ask Anita for more direction, or if y'all want an update on.
Yeah, I've read the documents specifically with that. I've been paying attention to that, and it sounds like it's going to be something that's going to be good, but I want to see it in practice, and so I'll be paying attention to that very closely.
Okay.
Can I just jump in and say, any specific questions about it, feel free to send me an email and I'll get you all a response. If Chair Neffy, if you have anything that you want to see specifically or anything I can provide. I know we have some resources on our website, and we did have a webinar a few months ago about it, but if you have any specific questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Anita. I certainly will, because again, I think this is a really important piece to it, that I've been in situations where this kind of creeps up, and all of a sudden, the thing that I was really excited about didn't pan out. But I'll certainly be reaching out, and I think once we, as a committee, get a better understanding of it, I think we'll have some questions.
And step 5 on our list is final recommendations. The one thing I want to point out here is in our outreach, I had mentioned that we had to have 2 meetings. One is now talking about what are your known flooding, and then number 2 is the second meeting that we're required to have as part of the plan is talking about what potential projects that we need public comment on the projects, and we also need their comment on our list of FMPs, FMEs, and FMSs. So we'll put that out, and that's the final recommendation and evaluation and public comment for that. So with that, are there any questions for me after I've gone through? I know we went through it in pretty good detail of what task 4 was. Derek is the chair of the technical committee. We spent a couple hours looking at it with them. They made comments. Jeff, Debbie made comments. We've incorporated those. We have some comments to incorporate, but overall, nothing earth-shattering. This is just the process, and it's pretty straightforward. This is the process that we're going to use. I don't think there's anything that to be too scared of in here as far as moving forward with. This is the process that we'll use once those projects start coming in and looking at them. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions. If we don't have any questions, then I think we would ask for approval.
I do have a question, Ron.
Sure.
And maybe you guys talked about it during your meeting. Whenever we do things like this, where we start identifying projects, when we start identifying processes and things like that, it's extremely critical that we're transparent with what we're doing, that the public gets an opportunity not only to comment and bring up an issue, but then is able to identify, well, what happened? What's the lifespan of that? I want to call it the complaint or a comment. What happens to that comment? How does it go from, okay, well, it's not a project, it's we need additional evaluation. And I'm interested also in the public outreach that we're going to be doing through this process. I think the process is excellent. It certainly makes sense, but I'm noticing that the public comment is really at the final recommendation. Was there any discussion about having more public meeting to update them or showing things on a website? Or tell me a little bit about transparency.
Transparency. Every public comment that we're collecting, all the ones that Mr. Mock put on there, you can see. So any comment that I recommend anyone, all of you that hear this, Aaron, you know where a lot of flooding issues are in town. Brian, Jeff, get in that map and add, Neffy, have your staff go in there and say, hey, y'all know where the flooding is. Get in here on this map. Yes, we'll take those. We're going to meet with you and your staff and everyone in this room. We're going to get that information from you, but go in there and look. Make sure that that there's something that's near and dear to you, Neffy. Make sure that it's on that map and you can see the information that we collect. And we're not throwing any of them out. We're not doing any review. If you put your backyard, we're gonna put it in there. It's not HDR half. We're not gonna throw anything out. We're gonna evaluate everything. All of it'll be a public comment. It'll live forever in our database, and it will be once we go through. We will look at these and. Possibly, depending on, we're going to make a recommendation once we collect them all, possibly some of them becoming FMEs, right? Or so they can become projects. So and looking at it.
So let me ask you, Ron, and I'm sorry, I haven't gone to the website to see that comment. I think I need to, but if Jeff puts his backyard, can I go on there and can I see the comments that other folks are putting in and just kind of follow them? Because, for example, Jeff may put something that I'm interested. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I agree with that. I agree with that low water crossing. Or David may put something, a strategy or something. I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in that.
I need to see
Is
how
there a
much
way?
of the
Can
data.
I track that?
I need to see how much of the data. I know you'll be able to see somebody put an issue in this location. I don't know how much. Let me get back with you on that because I don't. There's ability for people to submit pictures. You won't be able to see the pictures like I can go in there and look at the pictures because it's going to roll straight into a geodatabase for me. But you'll be able to see the point, and I don't know if there's any of those attributes that are going to. I don't know which, if any of those attributes you can see right offhand. But
yeah, I just want to reiterate that having experienced this in my community in San Antonio. Transparency is key. If we can't show the public the progress of this concern or comment, and then the ultimately development of a project and so forth, I think there's going to be a mistrust there if they can't see what happened. And I want to make sure that we are finding ways to keep people aware of what's going on. Otherwise, it's going to be tough sell.
Neffy, can I just, ask a question on your comment? Because it sounded like, I think you're saying that public comment oftentimes comes in like we have it depicted here at the very end where, there's been this selection process and then it's like, hey, this is what we want to do versus maybe earlier, maybe there's some intermediate type of steps where we're gathering the initial information now, just like y'all talked about, but maybe as we go through this, I'm not saying we change the document necessarily, but that right before we go to detailed evaluations, there's more information that is posted or discussed so that people see the menu of things that are being considered before we just go to the final recommendation where it's gone from 10 down to 3 and all they see is the 3. Is that where you're getting at?
Derek, you're absolutely right, because I know we're doing a good job of going out there. I mean, earlier today, Mr. Mock and Mr. Carroll explained the success of this meeting that they had. The idea that we become a black box, that people submit comments and then the sausage is made and then boom, here we go. This is the final product. I don't think that's going to help us. I'm not asking to change the process. I guess what I'm asking is we need to make sure that in that sausage making process of evaluating and so forth, that there is the individual that commented at that December meeting, that they have the ability to go back and say, okay, I commented on this low water crossing because it's by my house and an emergency vehicle can't get to me. How does that become eventually a project? And me as a citizen, I want to be able to see that develop. Because I think that if we don't do that, if we don't show the progression and show that, I think we're going to be doing a disservice to our community, because they're going to say, okay, well, here, that's wonderful. I mean, somebody decided to cut me out of the process. You see what I'm saying? Recognizing obviously that not every comment is going to become a project, but at least they're able to see, okay, it's transparent, it's open. Here's the decisions that we are making. That's what I'm asking for. That we make sure that people's comments, as well as anything that's proposed, that they'll be able to come back and look and say, okay, well, it's now under evaluation. They've determined it's not enough data. Now it qualifies for this. That's what I'm asking for. That there is that people can see what the results of that is, instead of just, here's a sausage.
I agree, Neffy. I think that kind of the process that the city used and having everybody's project that spoke up to be included on some kind of a list to see where it is in the process, that they've been heard. I agree.
Debbie, and you're absolutely right. And I wish Suzanne had been here, because she co-chaired the committee, and that was one of the things that she brought up, and I really like that. And that's why my very first comment was, let's find out, and Kendall addressed it. Let's get her the comments, and let's make sure, because these comments that the people are going to present to us are so key and so important, that we need to make sure and have a spreadsheet. We have to be able to know what happens to that comment. That's why. And I think on the drainage committee, that was a lesson learned, that was very successful. And I'd like to see that. Any other comments or questions about this methodology, or about this screening process that Ron has presented? Mr. Carroll, anything? Mr. Mock? Okay, very. Online, Mr. Steve Klaus, any comments that you may have on this process, or concerns that you might?
No, I like the process. I like your comments, Neffy, about having some way to track how we've dealt with each one of those comments along the way. I'm good with it.
Thank you, sir. Doris, is Doris still on?
No, I don't have any concerns. It's well thought out.
Thank you, Doris. And I see you got your camera on. Awesome, it worked. Mr. Gonzalez, any comments about the process or what we've been discussing?
No, I mean, well, I don't know. I do have a little bit of a comment on what's going on. I mean, I understand how we have to document everything that the public says, but it's so difficult. I mean, you and I, when we both worked at the River Authority, we were, our department's the one that put together the Bexar County, flood program, and we were the technical arm of Bexar County. The only thing I can say about that is that when people put projects out there, I think it's important to show the different metrics associated with those projects, because some of them will definitely filter out. I was at y'all's meeting last night, the drainage meeting, and I heard a lot of what was said. It made perfect sense, for since I'm on the streets committee, and I was a part of that as well. But there's a lot of things that the general public says that I know it's a concern, and it's a concern for them, but it's a local concern, and it's very difficult to handle local concerns on a regional type basis. I mean, it can't be done. I mean, you can't be going out there and fixing individual culverts and individual bridges and stuff like that that are just gonna just help one person. The drainage, what I think it's so important that we need to do, similar to when we were doing the Bexar County stuff, we need to lay out those metrics and what's important to these projects. Drainage area is always one. That, remember how we when we used to figure out that if the drainage area was less than, I forget what the acres was, but if it was less than, or square miles, whatever it was, whatever, if it was less than that, it didn't make the list, you know? So I think it's important what was said, but yeah, there's gonna be a lot of projects that people bring forth. And I heard that a lot yesterday too in the general public from y'all's meeting, that just, I mean, they don't make sense. And so yeah, I'm hopeful that we can document those and let the general public know that, yeah, that we realize that this is a difficult thing for you individually, but unfortunately it's we're trying to, you know, look at the bigger picture, and hopefully the bigger picture will eventually fix those local projects, but sometimes they can't. Sometimes a local, it's just a local issue, and you just can't, we can't be fixing local issues. So I hope that doesn't sound like the Grinch. I guess I'm getting close to Christmas, but you know, I'm just, you know, we've dealt with this in the past, so just drawing on past experience.
Thank you, Mr. Grinch. I mean, Mr. Gonzalez, certainly appreciate your comments. Certainly understand that, and having not only been a part of that, understanding then that process, but I think you agree with the importance of document. And it is a kind of a headache for us, but I think we owe it to document that well. Mr. Jantis, do you have any comments or questions with regard to the screening process or the discussion that we've been having?
I don't, except I just went to the website to go look, and looks like I think there's 8 comments on there, and they're all from Bandera County, and I would assume that's because y'all just had the public meeting last week in Bandera. So I'm also going to assume that there's going to be some comments from Barrett County after the January meeting in St. Hedwig, but do we need to work on getting the word out to the rest of the counties about this website to make public comment about issues?
Hey, Brian, this is Brian Mast at the River Authority. We'll absolutely start pushing this app out across the watershed. We have yourself and plenty of other contacts. Please, any members of this committee and your stakeholder groups, your contacts, push it out as well. I'm here looking at the map. It's very accessible, easy to use. And so we all need to be pushing it, but the River Authority will be doing so in conjunction with Ron and Linda Jimenez and Associates. So
I know for the stakeholder meeting, you guys sent us some Twitter and Facebook social media templates that we were able to patent off to my staff and send out. Are you going to do the same?
We have those and are pushing those out as well.
So a little update just to kind of clarify some of that. We have a QR code that anyone can put on any social media, their website, that'll take you directly to this link that you can use on your phone. We have the link that anyone's, Brian or anybody who wants to put anybody want to put on their website. We have that. We have flyers. We have all the social media. Brian, we will be meeting with the outreach committee coming up soon, and we are holding these public and stakeholder meetings in the lower counties. We're talking about doing 2 or 3 down in the lower counties. So after the first of the year, you'll start hearing about meetings in your area, and so hopefully we'll see those dots start trickling south. So as we go through. One thing to note, probably the comments that were made, Brian, most of those probably are from Mr. Mock sitting right across the table from me. And I expect that that's going to be a lot of you sitting in this room, and others is the ones who's going to put the information there. As we get information, if Mr. Carroll provides his information to me electronically through a GIS system, we can import that into the geodatabase and those will show up as well of information that we've collected. So you don't have to put every piece of, Neffy, don't worry, you don't have to work on the weekends putting each 311 into the comment map. We will be able to import those for you. So, but yes, Brian, we are going to be looking for everyone to get the outreach information out and the tool, and it'll be open for a while. So we know we're just getting started, but yes, that's we will be working on getting the word out.
And for those of you who have not explored the map yet, I will be including that when I send out the tech memo.
Okay, for the sake of time, we're running close on time, if that clock up there is correct. We are running close on time. So at this point, we do need to take a motion and action on this evaluation process, screening process. So
I recommend that the motion move to accept the identification and evaluation of potential FMEs, FMSs, and FNPs as amended by the planning group today. That would be the formal motion.
Okay, but I did have a question because during the discussion, we decided in step 4, we wanted to add a bullet as amended. That covers, okay, because keep in mind for the committee, on step 4, we did ask to include an additional criteria evaluation looking at O&M or other constraints. So we did have an extra bullet. So just please be aware that we are going to take action on this and specifically for step 4, an additional bullet was added. So I'm sorry, Kendall, I'm going to ask you to repeat that again, and then if I can have an action, if I can have a motion.
Sir, the motion is to accept the identification and evaluation of potential FMEs, FMSs, and FMPs as amended by the planning group today.
Can I have a motion?
I'll move what Kendall said.
Can I get a second? Mr. Mock seconded. Any discussion or any other comment about it? Hearing none, let's vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Item approved. Item is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great job, guys. Let's move on to item number 8. Both Suzanne and Kara are not present today. I think they're out. Christmas parties or something. But Dave is here. Mr. Mock is here, who did leave a Christmas party to join us. So I wanted to make sure that got on the record. Mr. Mock, do you have an update from the other region that you attend?
Don't got anything really to go over right now. They're doing the same thing we're doing. They're a little bit ahead of us. Their next meeting, I think, is going to be the 3rd of January. I'm going to get a copy of their technical committee's recommendations because one of my colleagues sits on that committee, and I'll bring it to you. I just didn't want to disseminate it out this close to Christmas because I find emails at Christmas, you forget about them. So I'll send it out to Kendall and get her to put it out.
And what region is that again? I'm sorry.
That's 13.
So has Region 13 already approved their memo? I'm assuming they probably have.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, they're over there too. And we actually talked about having an outreach in Bandera County for 13 out there. We thought that'd be interesting because HDR is the contractor there, and we have headwaters of the Nueces in Bandera County. So,
thank you, sir. Thank you for your report. The next item number 9. Once again, we have a public comment. Again, remind you, limit to 3 minutes per person. Kendall, did we have anybody sign up?
No, sir, there are no signups for public comments.
Okay. All right, that makes it easy. Go on to agenda item number 10. Kendall, I'm going to turn the time over to you on this one.
Yes, sir. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 4th at 10 a.m. We will be reviewing the tech memo.
Mr. Chair, can we go ahead and look at setting the February date for not only Mr. Mock, but also for our guest speaker, David Skudos from the Mile High Flood District?
Do we have a potential date for February, Kendall?
If we'd like to return to the third Thursday, that would be February 17th. If that works for you, Chair Nephew.
That works for me. Debbie, what do you think about which would be the February 17th?
That date doesn't work for me or for Mr. Scudos. So do you need me to make another recommendation? Like the 18th from 9 to 3, anytime in that time period? Nope. 16th?
The issue with the 17th would be that it would have to be in the afternoon. Does the afternoon, the 17th, does that help?
He's not available at all on the 17th.
Oh, he's not available.
Yeah, the date's out.
Would it be possible for him to come on the following meeting?
The following week?
March?
The 24th between 11:30 and 2 p.m.
Is that 11:30 Mountain Time or?
Oh, thank you for reminding me. You told me to be sure to remember that. Yes, so that would be 10:30 to 1, right? No,
Which,
the
on
other
which
one.
day, Ms.
For
Ray?
March 24th.
March 24th.
You mean the next month? Oh, no, I don't have dates for, I've already asked.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're looking at February. How's the rest of the committee in the afternoon for February 24th? No. Anybody on the virtual, the 24th February? Any preference, morning or afternoon?
That's a better week for me than the week of
The 17th
14th.
or the
Yeah,
14th?
just 'cause I'll actually be in San Antonio, but the stock show is going on. So.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say that as part of our February meeting, one of the things that I believe that we're going to have to approve is the geodatabase that was originally part of the tech memo submittal that's now due March the 7th. And that'll be, you'll actually look at the data on a web viewer. It'll be a different presentation. It won't be necessarily a.
So does the 24th work?
The later you can get, the farther closer to the end of the month,
That
the better.
helps you?
There's a lot of data, yeah. So
Okay, well then let's plan for February 24th for the next meeting because that'll help our consultant. And it sounds like we'll have a couple of folks here for Stock Show and Rodeo. Jeff, you're going to be really busy that day.
Would you like it to be in the morning or afternoon, sir?
My preference would be the afternoon simply because Thursday mornings are really hard for me.
We can do 2 o'clock again?
Yes, please. February 24th at 2 o'clock would be February meeting. But taking a step back, important meeting will be January 4th, and that's going to be a morning meeting, 10 o'clock. It's important that we attend, participate, because this is when we're going to approve the tech memo that's going to be due a few days after that at the end of that week. Okay?
Yep.
All right. Well, now we're at the point where I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Certainly appreciate it.